Hey guys, welcome to another video here on the Aviation Pro channel. In this video we're going to take a look at the new Rex Environment Force. So Rex Environment Force is yet another installment in the long list of Rex products over time. And I think many people wonder, what this product actually does. What's the function, how does it work together with other weather engines, and how does it work together with texture add-ons like Skyforce by Real Environment Extreme as well. So in this video we're going to review this program. I'm going to kind of explain in my own words, how this product fits in with all those other programs like Skyforce, and I'll just show you the positives and negatives along the way as we explore Environment Force. So make sure that you actually make use of the timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead to certain parts of this video. For now, let's take a look at Environment Force, what its function is and how it relates to other Rex products and other weather engines. Now in essence, Environment Force is really a shader product. Now if you're familiar with shaders, products like Tomato Shade or PTA, those are programs that adjust the values of the shaders inside the sim to make the sim look better, where you can, for example, adjust cloud size, cloud lighting, cloud color, terrain lighting, or water color and water lighting, basically allowing you to make the sim look a lot better and a little bit more dynamic using different values. Now, the idea behind these shader programs is that you just adjust values, and then you can save those values to a so-called preset, and then you can create different presets to have different dynamics in the sky basically. So at the start of every flight, at the start of every sim session, you could just load your favorite preset and change up for another preset the next day, for example. So you can kind of have a bit more diversity in your flight, so that not every flight looks the same. Every flight will look a little bit different depending on which preset you load in your shader program. And what Environment Force does, and which is really groundbreaking I think, and is really the best part of this product, is that it is able to adjust all shader values on the fly. So you don't have to quit your simulator, you don't have to shut down and save a preset and load it the next time. You can just adjust the shaders on the go within the sim itself. So this is really cool. And what the Rex team has also done is that you can also change for example, cloud textures and sky textures if you're using one of the Rex texture products. So instead of messing about with values in, for example, PTA and hoping that you have a nice end result, in Environment Force you can just open up the sim and on the go adjust the shader values, so you really create the perfect setting for your flight. And with that, again, you can also change the sky textures and the cloud textures. So how does this fit in with other products? Now I'm just going to show you my situation. Maybe you can kind of relate to this. Now I'm using Skyforce 3D by Rex for the textures mainly. It does come with a weather engine, but I'm using Active Sky as a weather engine actually. So Skyforce is only really used for textures in my situation. Next, you have the weather engine, and again I'm using Active Sky as a weather engine. You could also use Skyforce 3D as a weather engine, and the weather engine basically just generates the weather into the sim and uses the textures from, in this case, in my case, Skyforce, in order to portray where clouds should be and kind of portray the general structure of a cloud front, for example. So you can really see based off the real world weather where which texture should be placed. If you take, for example, Active Sky, if you just use the weather engine of Active Sky, it doesn't really come with textures. It actually uses the textures provided by Skyforce in order to portray the weather in the sim based off real world conditions. So where does Environment Force now come in? You may wonder, I already have a weather engine, I have textures, isn't that already dynamic enough? Well, what Environment Force again does is, again, it's more of a shading utility, and it allows you to swap textures, and that's something new. Previously, for example, using Skyforce, you would just install a set of textures and then your weather engine would use those textures, and then after a few days maybe you wanted to change your textures, and then your sim would look a little bit different. Environment Force allows you to do that on the go throughout the flight. Your day textures, for example, would look different, and your cloud textures would also look different, and the general shader values also look different. That's kind of what Environment Force does. It's really adding dynamics, and in order to show this, I'm just going to show you the product, and I'm going to show you how you can change all the variables and how this looks into the sim, and then it will make more sense as to what Environment Force really does in conjunction with a texture add-on like Skyforce and a weather engine like Active Sky. Alright, so here we have the main program. I'm just going to show you the basics. It's available for about $32 US. People who have purchased Rex Skyforce before can actually get a 10% discount, so that's nice. So it's not hugely expensive. People using Skyforce will find that this menu layout is very familiar, and I'm just going to kind of run you through. Start with the dashboard. Here you have different presets. So again, these are more kind of presets in about shaders, so we can really change the shaders inside the sim. Anyways, basically on the left here you can change all kinds of variables, and we're just gonna look at that in a minute. So you can change the size of the clouds, the coloring of the clouds, and how clouds form and dissipate. You can change the sizing of the cirrus clouds as well. You can change the lighting. So for example, if you enable manual lighting, you can adjust the lighting of the general scene, of the clouds, of the environment, and you can also adjust the global visibility. Okay, so you can also do the same for water. So depending on the weather conditions, the water will have different looks as well, which is pretty nice. So you can adjust those values right here. And same for the environment and terrain coloring, for example. So this really is very useful to really create a sort of a mood inside the sim, depending on the weather conditions. So these are all on the left, right here, shader values that you can change on the go. And we'll take a look at that in the sim in a minute. And right here, we actually have texture syncing. So this allows you to swap textures on the go. Again, previously, you would have to quit the sim, load a new texture set and start a new flight. So for example, let's say we're currently flying with the Denizen texture set, and this, by the way, comes from Skyforce 3D. Let's say we just want Euphoria right now, and for cirrus clouds we want Ubiquitous, for example. So I just select that and then click Sync Now, and this will load those textures inside the sim. So it will make your clouds look a little bit different. Now the first side note that I have to give here, and kind of it's not really negative, but it's kind of surprising to me, is that, Environment Force will just use the textures from Skyforce. Previously, you had to have Skyforce running in the background in order to really create the 3D models. But from what I understand, right now you don't have to run Skyforce anymore in the background, unless you're using its weather engine, which I don't. But it's kind of weird, right now, Skyforce, all that product has really done right now is provide textures and models. So Environment Force takes care of the rest. So we can just leave Environment Force running in the background. It will take over the functionalities of Skyforce that you would originally have running in the background. So it's a bit kind of weird in a way, but it works. So I'm happy that I at least now can just have one product running in the background. And again, you can just change the textures right here, and you can do the same for sky textures. So again, depending on your mood or what you think the sky should look like, and just click a set of sky textures right here, build it, and then sync it into the sim. Again, we'll take a look at that in a minute. So that's really what it does. Now, within this, you can also save presets, so you can just adjust all the values to your liking. And when you have created a situation, a sky situation, so to speak, that looks promising, you can save that preset right here, and then it will show up on the list. And on the dashboard, you can also view presets from community members, okay? So you can just load that into the sim. Again, just creating a lot of diversity. And here we have the general tab. Again, just the standard stuff. You can adjust some options right here where your prepared is installed, and some sounds or logging systems that you can change. Profile contains your personal information regarding the product. Of course, you can install updates, so that's also nice. It will automatically check for updates. Then textures, as you can see right here, Skyforce is enabled. Now, this is the first real negative, I would say. Currently, it's only compatible with Skyforce 3D or Rex Texture Direct, so you can enable that right here. So it really takes textures from those add-ons in order to build that into the sim and change that into the sim. However, they are working on third-party compatibility too. So for example, when you use, for example, ASCA clouds, that would also work later on. So you have to have a Rex product in order for this, the texture swapping to work. The shader stuff will work because, this is just sim values that you're changing. So even if you use ASCA clouds, I still think that you can actually, change the cloud coloring and all that stuff, but you cannot swap textures. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that you will have to have a Skyforce product or the texture direct product by Rex in order to actually swap cloud or sky textures. Here we have the cloud textures. Again, these are settings that you would normally set in Skyforce 3D as well, but right now you can also set that right here just to make sure that you have the appropriate resolution of clouds. And here are some other options. You can, if you have HDR enabled in the sim, you can turn this on, and vaporous skies as well. So this is a little bit of an overview of the program itself. We're just going to go into the sim and take a look at what it really does. I think that's the best way to really explore this product. Alright, so welcome into the sim. I just departed from the default airport using the 787, paused the sim and selected the building storms theme to kind of show you how the clouds change and how the lighting change of the sim. Now, the general principle is that Environment Force has either a manual mode or an automatic mode. In manual mode, you will be able to adjust all the values accordingly. And in automation mode, you can click on change modes here. You can just have a tweak-free experience. So depending on the weather conditions, Environment Force will adjust all the values that you can normally adjust right here accordingly. We're going to take a look at the automation mode later, so we can assess, what its function is and how well it performs. Okay, so for now, we're just going to use the manual mode. Again, you can adjust shader values basically. That's what it's all about, and that's on the go. So it is compatible with other shader tools like PTA and Tomato Shade, although I do think some people had some problems with cockpits graying out and some coloring problems, so I think they're working on a hotfix for that. But in general, if you apply a PTA preset, it will just set the values within the sim. Okay, so how does this work? So here in the cloud section, for example, you can change the size of the clouds. So really by just dragging the slider, you can actually see that the clouds change. So depending on what things looks best for your situation, you can just adjust this slider. And it's very nice. So previously, again, you would just had to set a random value and then hope it would look nice. Now you can just adjust it in the sim and actually make it look nice according to what you want. So let's say we want some large clouds today. Well, then maybe a larger value like 0.7 will work. Then you can also adjust the colors of the clouds, for example. Depending a little bit on the weather conditions and what you think will look best, you can kind of change the color of the clouds. So for example, maybe you're flying in some more desert situation with a bit more orange sunshine, then you can kind of adjust the values to, for example, show a little bit more red in the clouds. So you can really adjust the colors right here. You can also easily reset the colors and that will turn everything back to default. So as you can see, just on the go, on the fly adjustment of the colors. You can also adjust the formation and dissipation of clouds, so you can kind of change the opacity of the clouds basically. That's really what this slider does. You can do the same for cirrus clouds. I don't think there are a lot of cirrus clouds showing currently. There are a few on top right here, but it's not much. So you can also adjust the opacity and the size of the cirrus clouds like that with this slider. Then the lighting, you can also adjust the lighting of the environment and the different elements inside it. So you can adjust the general lighting. Yeah, I don't think this really works. It really is more of a method of making it look darker. For example, when it's rainy, you could kind of adjust that lighting like that. For now, we'll just leave it at 1. But you can adjust the cloud lighting as well though, so you can really make the clouds look dark, which is really nice if you really want to create some sort of rainy atmosphere or really thunderstorm look to the clouds. But again, in automation mode, this would work automatically. So in automation mode, if the system detects that the clouds, that there are just a lot of clouds in the area, a lot of rain, a lot of thunderstorms, it should be able to adjust, all of this automatically. You can also change the environment shading, so that's just kind of the general brightness of the shades, as you can see. So far, as you can really see, it's really about changing stuff on the go, and that's what I really like about Environment Force You don't have to just adjust values anymore and then hope it will look nice. You can actually adjust it in the sim, and as soon as you found kind of a perfect preset, you can save it and then use it for your next flight. So we'll just explore the functions further. You can adjust the global visibility. If you're using a weather engine, for example, probably you don't really want to touch this anyways. You can also change a lot about the water. So you can adjust the saturation. You know, in the manual, these values are all explained, so you can actually see what they all mean. I don't exactly know what they all mean, so I'd have to read the manual for that. But you can kind of play around with these values. You know, adjust the reflection and all that stuff. So you can really adjust it to your liking. Then you can also adjust the general coloring of the environment. This has more effect on the terrain, so you can, for example, make it look a little bit more red or a little bit more green. So as you can see, the general colors inside the sim change quite a bit. So again, you can just play around with these values. And here's some more sliders adjusting the terrain coloring and water coloring even further. So as you can see, that really has a big effect on how the water looks. And again, it's something that you can just adjust according to your liking or according to what you think works best with your weather situation. So far we've really looked at adjusting shaders and variables inside the sim that change the looks of the environment, the lighting and the shadows of the environment in the clouds. But again, using Environment Force, you can also change textures on the fly. So we'll just have a look. Let's start with the clouds first. Let's say we want some different 3D clouds. Let's say we want the flux clouds today, and then for the cirrus clouds we want new ones. So what you can do right now is just select these and then sync them into the sim. So make sure you pay close attention to how the 3D clouds in front of the aircraft kind of look right now, and then I'm going to sync them into the sim so you can see kind of how that changes. As you can see, the 3D clouds now have a different structure. Now in automation mode this would go more gradual, but in manual mode you will just see that popping up instantaneously. We'll do the same for the cirrus clouds, so we can sync them right now, and as you can see they look quite a bit different. So that's very nice. You can just adjust depending on what you think looks best, any cloud that you want. So let's just do another one. Let's pick another 3D cloud texture. As you can see, again, a little bit different. Sometimes the differences are subtle, but depending on the weather conditions, such subtle differences can make quite a big difference overall. And especially the shader functions, if you change them, can have quite a big difference. For example, 3D clouds morphing, you can imagine that on a nice summer day, clouds may look a little bit smaller, but on a very rainy day with a lot of thunderstorms or rain areas in the neighborhoods, clouds will look a lot bigger. So you can, for example, if you have very bad weather in the Netherlands, we usually have very rainy days where just these big clouds pass by with rain. But you also have nice summer days where the clouds just look small and look a little bit more light. And then lastly, you can also do the same for sky textures. So you can set different textures depending on the time of day. You can build that, and then you can actually sync it into the sim. So it will just make the general coloring of the environment different depending on your preset. So I hope this kind of shows you how Environment Force changes the sim. Again, it can just adjust the shaders and the textures on the fly, and that's really what this product is mainly about. And overall, I think what it does, it just creates more dynamic in the sim, especially in automation mode. And we're going to take a look at that in a minute. Before we do that though, there is actually a kind of mini user interface within the sim that also pops up when Environment Force is running. For some reason it's also popping up in automation mode for me. One negative that I would like to mention is that I just prefer to have this menu completely gone. You can minimize it. It will show a little icon in the bottom left corner of the screen. You can't see that right now, but as you can see right here, it shows a little icon. It's not very distracting or anything, but it would just be nice to not show that at all in automation mode. You don't really need it if you are in automation mode, I would say. But basically, using this menu, you can even adjust the settings a little bit further. It's more of an advanced adjustment with a lot of different variables. For example, cloud light. It's quite weird. You can create quite different and weird looking situations. But again, if you adjust values right here, and if you find something nice, you can, if you've adjusted all the values, you can save that as a preset as well. So what this means, you can change both the values inside the actual environment force or change more advanced values inside the mini user interface and then save a preset. So let's say we think this looks nice, you can save the preset, give it a name, and then click OK. And then whenever you feel like it, you feel like this preset works best for your flight at this point of time, you can go to the presets menu and then inject it into the sim. Alright, so this is all the manual tweaking stuff, manual tweaking of shaders, adjusting the environment to your liking, saving a preset and creating different presets. Again, on the right here, you can inject any preset from other users, so you can just click inject. The environment looks a little bit different again, okay? So that's kind of nice. You can just inject many presets along the go. Well, this one looks a little bit weird. I think the clouds look a little bit too blue. Let's try this one. That looks kind of nice. Again, just a different set of textures, different set of lighting, different ambience overall, so to speak. When you select these presets and inject them, it will not be very seamless, but this program has also automation mode, and this is what I personally would normally use. I'm just flying the sim. I don't really care about adjusting all the values. I just want it to change it in the background for me. So right here you can click on change modes and then go into the automation modes. So in the automation mode, what this does is that it just adjusts the values that we've just changed in the manual mode and that we saw change in real time in the sim. It will now do that all automatically in the background and a little bit more smoothly. We have different functions right here. We have weather automation control. Use this slider to control the duration in which automation of key weather elements change over time. So this kind of determines how fast you transit from one cloud texture to the other, for example, or at what rate the clouds will change size. So you can adjust that using this slider. I think the default is 5. I put it at 2 just to experiment. And you have different functions right here. So you can enable weather smoothing. It will work with weather engines like ActiveSky, which already have a smoothing system. It says here that you have to disable it if you're using, for example, ActiveSky, but I just actually have it left enabled, didn't really notice any impact. But anyway, you can also enable real-time weather data reads. So what this does, it will get the weather from NOAA and then use that in order to change the values inside the sim. Now you have to leave this setting off if you just want to use the weather information, for example, from ActiveSky. If you're using historical weather, it's best to leave this off, so it will just read the historical weather that's being injected into the sim by ActiveSky and then use that. So I generally leave this off, so it really adjusts the automation according to the weather that's being injected into the sim. Now there's some more settings. You can allow it to change the size of the 3D clouds, the cirrus clouds. You can allow it to change textures on the go. So within your entire Skyforce texture set, it will be able to change that accordingly. As I just showed you in manual mode, it will now do that in automatic mode in the background. And we're going to take a look at some time lapses later in order to see how this really works. And you can also let it adjust the scene lighting and the water. So really, this is for people like me who just like to fly. And what this overall does, I think, it just adds more dynamic to the sim overall, so that no one situation is the same. That when you're departing out of an airport, the weather situation will look different from when you're arriving at the airport. Where previously, arriving at the airport, you would be flying with the same textures. And although the clouds, the position of the clouds may look a bit different, and the density of the clouds look more different. Right now with environment force, you can actually see that the coloring is also a little bit different, and that the size of the individual clouds is different and matches better what you can actually expect for these kind of weather conditions. So that's really nice. That's what the automation mode is all about. So that's a bit of an overview of the program itself, what the manual mode does and what the automation mode does. And as you can see, it's really just about creating presets in manual mode and easily injecting them and exactly seeing what is happening in the sim, and just adjusting the general look of the sim according to your liking by actually seeing it. And I do think that's really groundbreaking. However, for me, Personally, as a simmer who just likes to fly, for me the automation mode was most important, you know, to really get more dynamics into the sim, and that not one scene looks the same, and then depending on the weather conditions, the weather just looks different. So I decided to put the automation mode to the test. First of all, I did a time lapse. I flew from Frankfurt airport to the south, kind of heading into rainy and cloudy weather, while in Frankfurt it was clear. So on the top you can see my previous look, you know, just running a Rex Skyforce 3D, and on the bottom you can see Environment Force being active in automation mode in the background. Now, as you can see, in general it already looks different. You can definitely see that Environment Force adjusts the shaders and the HDR lighting. So in general you have a different look to the sim, and depending on how automation mode changes it, of course. Now, as you can see, we're now turning south and heading towards the more rainy area. Now here you can kind of better see how Environment Force changes stuff. So at some point you kind of see this rainy area kind of disappear and then reappear using different cloud textures. Now, of course, this appears fast in this time lapse, but in reality it's more smooth. It's more depending on how you set your automation mode, it's more gradual. So when you're flying you don't really notice it, but you can definitely see that's a little bit different. And then if we look a little bit further, if we look a little bit more closely at the clouds, as you can see, as we fly closer to the clouds, you can actually see that the 3D clouds in this rainy area are actually changing and kind of becoming bigger as I get closer. While on the top, on the video where I just use Skyforce, you do not really see the clouds change at all. They're just put into position by active sky, but the clouds themselves are not very dynamic. And that's what Environment Force is doing here. It is subtle again, but I guess you really have to fly into different weather conditions, because automation mode really depends on weather conditions. Based off those meta reports and based off the weather that's being injected into the sim, it's going to change the values. So it doesn't really mean that you will see clouds changing all the time. It really just changes it on the go. So in order to illustrate this further, I actually made a flight from Bratislava to Amsterdam, and kind of flying into different weather situations again. Now again, it's very subtle, these changes under automation mode, so it may not be very apparent. It may not be as apparent as when you change stuff in manual mode. You know, if you change stuff in manual mode, you can really see the clouds change instantly. But in automatic mode, it's so much more gradual that you don't really notice it until you kind of compare before and after shots. So here are some stills of my departure out of Bratislava, which was clear weather, kind of blue skies, small clouds. And when you compare it to the arrival into Amsterdam, you can definitely see that the clouds are different. They have a different size. Just like you changed the cloud morphing in manual mode a while ago, you can definitely see that the size of the clouds in general has changed. And what you can also see here is that the sky textures have changed as well. So you can definitely see that on departure it was very blue. Upon arrival it was a little bit more grayish, kind of representing the more cloudy weather at Amsterdam. It may not be very apparent, and I think I just have to make more flights to really see it in action and really fly into very different weather situations and see it change. But overall it definitely is running in the background. So depending on the weather conditions, you really fly into a different situation, and no one single cloud texture looks the same again. And automation mode also changes watercoloring, so that's also nice. So for example, in this example you can see the differences between just using Skyforce in one situation and using Environment Force. You know, again, depending on the conditions, the water will have a little bit of a different look to it. And in general, I think Environment Force does a really good job at just blending in all the shader stuff and the HDR stuff in order to create a very nice picture. One negative though is that with HDR they really are playing around with the settings and adjust the bloom. So when you first use Environment Force, you will see that the HDR settings are not what you're used to in terms of bloom and brightness. So when you, for example, look at the FMC inside a dark cockpit, and then when you look outside again, you know, the outside is very bright. The whole apron is just almost white. And you know, I think this is something they're actually working on in order to make them more look more realistic. There are some posts on this topic on the forum as well, so you might want to check that out. But in general, for example, during the sunset near the Tokyo area, I think it actually looks very nice. It's very well blending with the shaders and with the HDR and with the appropriate textures. One thing that I missed though is what I really would like to see in the future probably is, I want to know what textures are actually being installed and which ones are actually active. I know you can save a preset and all that stuff, and then maybe from there you can judge the sky textures, but in automation mode I just want to know what's going on. Because the differences are so subtle, sometimes I wonder whether it's really active, but I'm sure it is, especially if you compare it to the departure photos from arrival photos. You can definitely see a difference, but I just like to know what it's really doing in the background, and that's what I really miss. I just want to know which sky textures are active, because you might also face situations like hey, this sky texture looks really nice at the moment, and this cloud looks really nice at the moment. Then you just want to know which sky textures are that, so you can actually create a preset using those sky textures. In the manual they say that, based off real world weather conditions, it changes the variables, but I'd just like to know a little bit more. So what then? So how exactly does it interpret real world weather, and based on that interpretation, how does it change the variables, so that I know kind of a bit more in depth what the program is doing? I think that would be very nice to know. So I think overall with this product, if you were really going for the automation mode, you will just see more variety. It's not just one texture set that the weather engine has to work with. It's just not one cloud size or cloud lighting that the weather engine has to work with. The weather engine, like Active Sky, just injects the weather, and then Environment Force adjusts the looks of the weather depending on the conditions. And again, overall it will just create a more dynamic environment. Then a short word on performance and frame rates. Personally, I did not notice any particular performance impact. I think it's just another program running in the background, and changing the cloud textures doesn't have any performance hit. Now, I'd like to conclude this review by giving you kind of an opinion and a perspective. I think overall what Rex Environment Force has achieved is definitely very nice, allowing you to adjust shaders, cloud size, cloud lighting, all that stuff on the go. You can really see what you're doing, save a preset or multiple presets, and inject them on the go. This is really nice. This is definitely in its own right groundbreaking, and I think the automation mode does a nice job at just creating more variety during your flights. That during the departure in one weather situation, the clouds and the size of the clouds and the lighting of the clouds and the general scene and of the terrain and of the water will look different upon arrival when you arrive into a different weather situation. So in its own right, is it worth it? Yes, I think it's worth it. However, I do think we've kind of reached the limits of the sim right here. Over time Rex has really worked hard at changing the sky environment of the sim. This happened back in the FS 2004 days. By then it was also really groundbreaking. Suddenly we had very nice sky textures, a lot better looking clouds, soft clouds, and with Skyforce 3D we suddenly had more 3D looks to the clouds, so weather fronts and storms could really be more accurately represented. And now with Environment Force we have added dynamics to the environment. But with that I think we've kind of reached limits. We're trying to work with a system where we play around with 2D textures. First, Rex has played around with 2D textures, making them look more 3D using Skyforce by creating models and placing 2D textures accordingly. And now the Rex team is trying to play around with 2D textures by changing them dynamically in the sim on the go. But it does not really truly capture what a true sky should look like. And I'm saying true sky because I'm referring to, like in my previous review of Skyforce, I'm referring to the actual product True Sky. This is still in development. I think this is kind of a rendering engine making the sky look very realistic. You can apply it to games or other software. And what they do there is really having actual 3D clouds. So not any 2D textures are involved. No, they actually render true 3D clouds, and based off that you can actually change the clouds much more dynamically. So instead of swapping a texture to make a cloud look bigger, no, the actual cloud grows, and instead of swapping a texture to make the cloud look darker, no, the cloud actually changes to a darker color over time by changing the 3D structure and the 3D lighting. And I think that is really what developers should aim for in the future. You know, again, we've reached the limits of the 2D texture model in the sim with environment force. It's nice, but we've reached the limits. And so I'm really wondering what their next step is. If they really want a true groundbreaking, changing weather system, they really should look at something like TrueSky. Maybe work together with TrueSky, I don't know, to really accurately represent the sky with 3D models. So it can really truly dynamically change the clouds, can truly dynamically see storm forming. In the end, and that's my personal opinion, we really need something like TrueSky. So I really hope that, you know, on their next installment of Rex products, they really release something groundbreaking by adding actual 3D clouds. Probably it's very difficult, but if that could be achieved, I'd be a very happy flight simmer. So with that said, thank you for watching this review of Rex Environment Force. I hope it has made a little bit more clear at what it actually does in relation to a weather engine and a texture add-on. And I hope it kind of made clear to you, how you can manually change and how it automatically changes the environment on the go. So I will definitely keep Environment Force running in the background from now on in my flights, really to add that variety. So make sure you also check out my review of Skyforce 3D, which was released a while ago. And if you'd like to support the channel, head over to patron.com/AviationPro. Your help would be very much appreciated. For now, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.